On this episode of O'Fallon Matters, we'll watch as volunteers make a difference, learn how to be safe during emergency spring flooding, and check in with student leaders who are creating a brighter future for elementary school students. All this and more next on O'Fallon Matters. Welcome to this episode of O'Fallon Matters. The Mayor's Youth Advisory Council organized a walk to focus on a devastating national health crisis which affects so many of our families and friends. Let's check in with Joe Meyer with details on the event.
St. Charles County and the city of O'Fallon are facing a heroin epidemic that's impacting the lives of our residents. According to the National Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, 80% of those admitted to treatment for heroin started with prescription pain medications. And did you know that in the past several years, the purity of street heroin has drastically increased, allowing it to be snorted instead of having it injected? In fact, the purity of heroin is never known to consumers. It can be cut with more potent drugs or diluted. This uncertainty drastically increases the chance of overdose. In less than a decade, the St. Charles County Ambulance District has seen call volume for heroin and opiate overdoses more than double. Paramedics responded to 192 such calls in 2008, and last year responded to 426. Communities throughout the nation have experienced similar growth, prompting President Trump to declare the problem a national emergency. Recently, the city of O'Fallon's Mayor's Youth Advisory Council decided to take a stand against this issue by organizing a walk to bring awareness to this growing crisis.
So today what we really hoped to accomplish was to bring light to the fact that St. Charles County has an issue, and that issue is the heroin epidemic that's plaguing our community. And unfortunately, a lot of people tend to shy away from talking about it because of the stigma and fear that brings. People are sensitive to the fact that people have passed away because of overdose. So today what we really hoped to do and what we accomplished was bringing the community out and having walkers out here in support of that agenda to bring awareness to the issue.
Local officials from the O'Fallon Police Department, St. Charles County Ambulance District, the Fort Zumwalt School District, and O'Fallon's Fire District were in attendance to help support members of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. Once walkers gathered, they set out on a 2-mile journey through North O'Fallon. But this walk was more than just raising awareness. It also helped families affected by this brutal epidemic heal.
I lost my boyfriend and the father of my 2 young sons in December of 2016. It was 14 days before our baby's first birthday and 21 days before Christmas. It for sure does help healing because you meet a lot of other families that are going through the same thing and waging this own war inside your own heart and your head, and you feel so alone. But when you come to these walks and you see all these other beautiful souls that have been touched by this, it's eye-opening and it's inspiring.
In the past decade, thousands in St. Charles County have died from opiate overdoses. And it's important that we stay informed and understand the enormity of the situation we face.
It can happen to anyone, really. There's not a typical victim, so to speak, of heroin, and it has affected more families than most people are comfortable with admitting. All ages, socioeconomic status, gender, it doesn't matter. Too many kids have to bury their parents, and too many parents are burying their kids these days, that something needs to be done and more awareness needs to be brought about it.
Remember that help is near if you or your family member are suffering from addiction.
Ask for help, reach out. There's no shame in asking for help because there is help out there. There are people that are willing and wanting to help. And so I think it's really, really important to understand that there are people here that are wanting to figure out what they can do to help you. So it's a pretty empowering experience to be able to do that. So I think if they're able to reach out and ask for help, I think we're starting to make a good movement forward to the progress.
Thanks to the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, first responders, and individuals who help bring awareness to the ongoing heroin crisis.
Behind the grade school, Forest Park Elementary.
If you would like more information on heroin facts and addiction treatment, go to ncada-stl.org.
O'Fallon's Finest recently held an accelerated police academy, but it wasn't for aspiring law enforcement officers. Instead, O'Fallon residents were allowed to step into the shoes of our police force.
Our O'Fallon Police Department has always enjoyed a close relationship with the community they serve. At our Coffee with a Cup events at local restaurants and coffee shops, and our yearly National Night Out in O'Fallon's neighborhoods, you'll see dozens of residents gathered to chat with our officers, ask questions or trade stories, and learn a little more about the men and women who put on the uniform every day. But for some residents, this wasn't enough. They wanted to experience exactly what it's like to be a police officer in O'Fallon, and our officers were happy to accommodate them. For the first time ever in our new Justice Center, about 30 residents spent 6 weeks going through our Citizens Police Academy to get a better idea of what policing is all about. And our Citizen Police Academies make for a pretty action-packed month and a half.
A lot of stuff happens. A lot of stuff happens. They get to come in, they get to learn constitutional law, they get to go on a 4-hour ride along. Next week we're going to the gun range. Tonight they're doing the virtual reality system, which is our lifelike system that they get to experience our officers when we train them how to shoot and don't shoot. They get CPR certified when they get done with this class. They can come out, they can go to their employers and they say, hey, I've been to a Red Cross certified class.
For a lot of people, their knowledge of criminal justice and forensic science comes from TV shows like Law & Order or CSI. One of the goals of the Citizens Police Academy is to present a realistic, unbiased view of what officers do on a daily basis. And from the very first session, when they were welcomed by our Chief of Police, participants were treated like real Police Academy recruits.
You're going to get the same information and classes that a recruit does in the police academy. The only difference is they get hours and hours of it. You're going to get an overview of it, but you're going to see some of the same things that they're taught in the police academy.
There are a lot of facets to being a police officer. Participants in our Citizens Police Academy got to experience them all with guest instructors and hands-on learning opportunities. During the academy, they learned about drugs of abuse from a former undercover cop, how crime scene investigations work, and what officers are looking for during traffic stops. Other sessions explained use of force scenarios and showed off our K-9 unit's capabilities. They even got to experience a scenario in our brand new Virtua simulator system, and fire the real weaponry our officers carry in our indoor range, all the while getting instruction and feedback, just like they were real police officers in the making.
You never let your finger off the trigger either, and that's a good thing. That's what we tell the police officers too.
Over the course of the Citizens Police Academy, participants learned just about every aspect of law enforcement, and it definitely changed how they view police officers.
I guess until you're put in that situation, and obviously being a trained officer is a little different than just going through a simulator, but until you're actually in that situation where you've got 15 different things going on around you all at once, and you've got to make that split-second decision, you don't realize how many things are actually going on.
You're actually seeing firsthand what it's really like. It's not sitting in front of a TV set watching cops. I mean, you're right there, front line. It was a very memorable experience.
I like the CPR part of it. I like the criminal investigation and also the simulator. I like the weapons and the challenge.
The Citizens Police Academy is held once a year at the O'Fallon Justice Center, and citizens from all walks of life are welcome to attend. In today's media-driven world, it's all too easy to view law enforcement with suspicion or fear, and our dedicated police force is glad to have a tool like the Academy to educate residents about our police force and allow them to get to know the person behind the badge. Plus, it's just fun for our officers to meet the men and women they serve.
Well, it's fun for me because I get to see the people that come in, and then I get to see their faces. They kind of get that aha moment where they're like, oh, so it's not like it is on CSI or MacGyver or whatever other cop show you like. They get to see what it really takes to be a police officer. We answer all their questions truthfully. We don't hold back any punches. So that's the satisfaction I get.
It's something that really changes your view of police. And I think that these days it's more important than ever because the view of law enforcement is so askew. And you learn so much respect for these officers. You see how much they give to their communities and how much they love what they do.
I'm glad for the opportunity to be able to take this class. The police officers, I think, have done a very good job of putting this together, or this department, and so I'm well impressed with it.
Congratulations to all of our 2018 Citizens Police Academy graduates. If you're interested in joining next year's Academy, consider following our police department on Facebook, where you'll get notifications and updates about all of our upcoming events delivered right to your newsfeed. If you have a question about a topic involving law enforcement, or if you just want to get to know our officers better, we'd love to see you at any of our community events.
This next story features a program that teaches positive coaching, and you won't believe who's doing the mentoring. Joe Meyer has the story.
During childhood, having a mentor or someone to look up to is important for a child's growth. The Fort Zumwalt School District knows this and has taken a proactive approach to peer influence since the 80s. Out of this approach came pushing for positive peer influence, and several years ago, Fort Zumwalt West Principal Neil Berry coordinated a leadership activity that stemmed from becoming a positive coaching district. As part of this initiative, Fort Zumwalt West formed an athletic leadership council, which ultimately blossomed into a positive mentoring program for students throughout the district.
One day, Samantha Sutton, one of my assistants, said, you know, it'd be cool if we could get these kids to talk to our elementary kids. And we brainstormed and sat down and came up with a plan. And there were a number of schools in our district that do the Leader in Me program, which is Stephen Covey's 7 or 8 Habits of Effective Kids. We had 16 kids we identified the first year. We used 8 habits. We had a team for each school, and we flip-flopped them back and forth so that they got to see every kid. So now 4 years later, we're doing 5 schools and have 40 kids.
Students are chosen for their leadership in a variety of different areas. Each member of the league has trading cards of themselves and identify the specific habit they represent. Students visit their feeder elementary schools during lunch to talk about the habits of happy kids.
And we travel to elementary schools once a month, and we are each assigned a healthy habit. There's 8 healthy habits, and they are represented on our cards that we hand out to the kids that we visit.
My habit is think, win, win. So I basically describe a situation in which I apply think, win, and then I also have my favorite book series, which is Diary of a Wimpy Kid. So you want to have something that relates to the kids. That way it's a conversation starter. And it's really cool whenever you go and you sit down and you'll be like, before I give you my card, guess my favorite food, and then they'll try to guess it. And then it's just kind of a way to start a conversation, and they'll talk about their favorite food, and it really plays out well.
Now, the high school students challenge the elementary students to collect, save, and trade cards so they have a complete set of the 7 habits cards by the end of the year. And to cap the program off, students are invited to get the autographs of their favorite league members during signing day. During these positive interactions, the league mentors get to give back and feel good in the process.
We're pretty much celebrities. The schools here, they talk us up, they tell them about us so the students get to know us. So when we get here, there's already kind of a connection. It's good in little children's lives for them to see an older positive influence, someone besides their parents, someone more of a kid who they can connect to, give them someone to look up to, someone to strive to be.
I'm actually at my old elementary school right now, so it's really fun to see all my old teachers and also talk to the kids where I used to be in their shoes, and yeah, it's just really cool to talk to them.
The league continues to be a successful program in the Fort Zumwalt School District, and it's teaching students to be good citizens before they reach college.
I think it's absolutely essential that our older kids realize that they have a responsibility to be good role models for the younger kids. I think when you watch the kids visit, you see the real value of the program, because the high school kids are so touched that the elementary school kids admire them, and it's unmistakable that the older kids recognize that, gosh, we have a responsibility for these younger kids. We have to be good role models for them, because that'll have some influence on how they grow up.
It's really neat to watch our kids' reaction when we come back the first time and just kind of debrief and listen to them. They're amazed at how these kids look up to them, and a realization that their actions do matter. It's pretty awesome.
Programs like the League are reasons why the city of O'Fallon continues to be named one of the best places to live in the country for families. High school students are putting smiles on the faces of kids while they learn a thing or two about themselves. Oh, and Dr. DeBray has the complete set of cards, and he's not planning on trading them anytime soon. Those cards are our future.
Severe spring weather can bring flooded roads, homes, and businesses, but there are a few simple steps you can take to safeguard your home and your family. OFallonTV's Brett Figgis is here to teach you how to stay safe during a flood.
When you hear about natural disasters in the United States, people tend to think of hurricanes ravaging the eastern coast or earthquakes striking major cities. But here in the Midwest, the most common and devastating natural disaster is flooding. And a few inches of rain can cause big problems in our communities. Just last year, a week of unprecedented rainfall caused nearly $86 million in damages. And in 1993, a historic flood put nearly 400,000 square miles of land underwater for over 200 days. Here in Missouri, nearly every town was at least partially affected. And while we've taken steps to reduce the possibility of future flooding, we're still at risk during major storms. If a flood ever does strike O'Fallon, we need to be prepared. And we've put together a list of tips and suggestions that can help you stay safe during an emergency. Because floods can strike at any time, it's important to be ready before the waters start rising. Flood safety starts with a family disaster plan that includes where to meet up if you get separated and where to seek shelter. You can also assemble a disaster preparedness kit for your family and your pets, plus a second kit to keep in your car. If you have enough warning, you can consider assembling sandbags to protect your home. But if the waters are rising now, you might need to evacuate. For more info on preparing for floods, head online to cdc.gov/disasters. Believe it or not, motorists are most at risk during flood events. Over 60% of flood-related fatalities happen to someone inside a car, usually while trying to drive across a flooded road. It takes just 1 foot of water to sweep away a car. And yes, that includes your SUV or pickup truck. So if you see barricades or flowing water, turn around. It's not worth the risk. Even standing floodwater presents a serious risk to you and your family. It can be contaminated by sewage or infectious viruses and bacteria, or pose an electrocution hazard from downed power lines or electrical devices inside your home. That's why it's so important to be ready to move to a safe shelter away from floodwater. With enough rain, floods could happen almost anywhere, but you're most at risk in designated flood hazard areas. Here in O'Fallon, floods tend to be concentrated along our creek beds and north of Highway 79. To help you understand the risk of flooding in your area, the city has an interactive map available at www.ofallon.mo.us/floodmap. If you have questions about your property in relation to floodplains, contact the City of O'Fallon's Floodplain Administrator at 636-379-5557. And if you'd like instant alerts about floods in our area, consider signing up for the city's emergency notification tool at www.ofallon.mo.us/emergency. This tool can update you about emergencies of all kinds by phone, text, email, and social media. Finally, if your home is at risk for flooding, ask your insurance agent if you're covered for flood damages. You may be eligible for a low-cost preferred risk policy, and renters can buy insurance to cover their possessions as well. Remember, floods can be deadly, but staying prepared can help you stay safe.
O'Fallon volunteers were on the move this spring. Let's find out how they're making a difference in our community.
O'Fallon's park staff works hard to prep hundreds of acres of parkland each spring. And you know what? It takes a village to beautify O'Fallon's parks. That's where our beloved volunteers come in. Each spring, hundreds of volunteers come from all over the city to mulch, paint, and even clean up our creeks. Volunteering isn't one of the most plush, easy, or glamorous of jobs, but it is one of the most beneficial and uplifting.
Spring projects are so important to the Parks and Rec Department because it gets everything prepared for the summer months, and everything that's happened in the winter, as far as trash moving into the creeks, all of the leaves that have fallen late fall, we're able to take care of that so the plants have their best chance to grow, so the creeks can really flourish with the ecosystem and the wildlife that lives in them.
Despite cold and rainy weather that halted several spring volunteer opportunities, students from Fort Zumwalt West and Christian High were still able to give back to our community. And for these students, volunteering is something they take pride in.
It has us become motivated individuals, and it's a good idea to always support each other in our community and come together as one.
Well, I think it teaches us good leadership skills since we are in the leadership class. It teaches us to be responsible and to just take care of the environment and our own city.
O'Fallon volunteers make our community a great place to live, work, and play. In fact, our volunteers are always gaining new experiences and insight. Not only are they giving back, but they're helping others. While no monetary compensation is received, O'Fallon volunteers will tell you that their work and experiences gained as a volunteer were worth way more than any money.
And it's something that we really want to foster and promote in them is not just like the have to, but man, we get to, right? We get to come out and give back. It's beautiful out here and it's fun for us. So
team building and exercise, and it brings us a lot closer together. It helps us to get to know each other better than we have been just through normal school.
As you can see, O'Fallon Spring volunteers created lasting connections and a sense of accomplishment. And there is no better time than now to get involved. We have several opportunities coming up.
It's great to volunteer for O'Fallon because we are a family-centered program. We would love to have you come out and just give back to your community. Everything that we do is community-focused, and we want you to be a part of that, and we want you to feel like you have an impact in everything that happens. We have a lot of opportunities in the summer, especially if you are interested in recreation events. The big one, of course, is the Heritage and Freedom Festival, where we need over 200 volunteers to come out and help. But we also have some events that are happening at the swimming pool. Alligators Creek is about to open, and we need volunteers there. And we need volunteers at the Renaud Spirit Center for many of their special recreation events.
For more information on volunteering in O'Fallon, you can visit our website at ofallon.mo.us.
From the healed home to Zumwalt's Fort, O'Fallon is a community filled with history. But there's one historical landmark you may pass by on a daily basis. O'Fallon TV's Brett Fickus is here to tell us the story of the School Street Water Tower.
Today on O'Fallon Matters, we're going to take you back in time to a very different O'Fallon. And we're going to share the history of one of our community's oldest landmarks, the School Street Water Tower. But this tower wasn't always there, and it's probably a bit newer than you'd expect. Nowadays, water is something we just take for granted, and the infrastructure that makes it possible, from the water mains throughout our community to the state-of-the-art water treatment plant that powers the system, is largely out of sight and out of mind. But it wasn't too long ago that O'Fallon didn't have a water system, and in the early 1900s, where your water came from was a whole different story.
What I've always been told is that they relied on cisterns, which might have been a tank in the ground that they collected water from the roofs, which flowed into the cistern, which they would then get the water as they needed it. So you can probably guess by that it wasn't always the best water, depending what might have been in the cistern along with the water. This particular map
goes back to 1905. The main source of water back in the early 1920s was the mill pond. Of course, that mill pond had to supply water for the residents here and also for the railroad, and also for fire protection. We've got a map, or not a map, but a picture of what the old firehouse was. That was actually, they had to lay lines to the mill pond to put water out. And it was a hand pump or a steam pump.
Building cisterns and relying on the mill pond for water worked when the population of O'Fallon was a few hundred people. It's hard to imagine now, but back in those days, O'Fallon was little more than a railway stop and a few shops and stores. But as O'Fallon grew, so too did the burgeoning town's water needs, and it became apparent that the city would need a more permanent solution. O'Fallon was racked by 2 serious droughts in the 1920s and 30s, and as a rural community, if the land couldn't provide enough water, you were pretty much out of luck. With just 600 residents at the time, O'Fallon couldn't afford a water tower on its own, but help came from an unexpected place. In 1935, the United States Congress approved the Works Progress Administration as part of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, and the WPA approached O'Fallon about building a well and tower in anticipation of future growth. If O'Fallon agreed to foot some of the cost, the WPA would handle the rest. But it still represented an enormous cost to our tiny community, and it took 4 years and 2 mayors to get it passed.
$150,000 in 1939 was a lot of money, and then the city's portion was going to be $40,000. But they still had to issue the bonds and get things going, get the engineering done.
O'Fallon was just coming out of the Depression, money was scarce, and that was a lot of money back in the day. And so people were a little skeptical of going into debt for the city to build water. But Mayor Westhoff at the time, which is Paul Westhoff, he was the mayor that broke the tie to get the water system actually started. And so even though it was controversial at the time, people in O'Fallon knew that they had to have a reliable source of water. And to do that, they needed a well and a tower.
A city well had to be dug first. A lot of people don't realize that. That well was actually drilled right on West Elm Street. Years ago when I worked for the city, that's where I used to report. That was well number 1. It was drilled about 900 foot deep, but it only gave maybe 200 gallons a minute. But that was enough water for the time back in the 30s and 40s. Then needed that tower, and the tower we're talking about, which is on School Street, 75,000 gallons. And now you had better pressure, you could put water out. And but a lot of people, I was reading some of these articles I hadn't seen for a while, their insurance rate dropped dramatically when the new water system came online.
With the tower in place, O'Fallon was poised to grow into the city it's become today. To give you an idea of how critical a reliable water system was in those days, take a look at this 1958 advertisement for O'Fallon that points to O'Fallon's modern sewers and water system above everything else, and notably 5 bullet points above low taxes. It also became a local landmark, visible in photos from the era, and it became something of an attraction for O'Fallon's youth.
I'm sure there's many people probably climbed it. I had to climb it, but I climbed it because I had to. Part of my job, I basically climbed most all the towers in town, but I'm sure that you could probably hear stories about people climbing it, but it wasn't a very safe thing to do at the time. But
I will say, I did try to climb the one on School Street, the tower we're talking about, and I think I made it about 15 feet up in the air before I decided I was better off on the ground. So I didn't make it very far up, but yes, that was always kind of a rite of passage of childhood sometimes, is to try to climb the water tower.
The School Street Water Tower served our community faithfully for decades, and even as new towers started to dot the O'Fallon skyline, our first tower remained in service. Finally, some 10 or 15 years back, this tower was emptied for the final time. It had several issues. Its capacity and location were no longer sufficient for the O'Fallon community, and it was basically superseded by more efficient towers elsewhere in town. Now, its story will be coming to an end, and this icon of O'Fallon will disappear from our skyline. But its memory will always be immortalized in old family photos and stories.
It was one of those things you took for granted, but if you looked up, you always saw that water tower, and it was an older style tower. It's not like the newer towers we have now, so it always stood out for its own, and it had a sense of character. And people always knew that was the first water tower for the city.
Thanks for joining us today. If you have a good story idea, let us know. You can email us at OFallonTV@ofallon.mo.us. And please remember, give back to your community because O'Fallon matters to all of us.